Welcome to PWS United, a podcast for the Prader-Willi syndrome community, brought to you by PWSA USA. This podcast gives the latest news in research, advocacy, and family support by bringing together staff, volunteers, PWS treatment specialists, biotech and pharmaceutical representatives, caregivers, family members, and individuals with PWS. Our goal is to share education, awareness, and resources with those living with PWS and their supporters. Join us in our mission to enhance the quality of life and empower those affected by Prader-Willi syndrome.
So before we begin, I just want to clarify to our audience that we are all participants, whether in the form of caregiver or in Justice's case, a patient, in Harmony's pitolisant trial. None of us are pharmaceutical reps or medical professionals or affiliated with the company beyond a patient or working capacity. We are approaching this topic today merely as participants and patients discussing our experiences and perspectives on clinical trials. There are other clinical trials for PWS just as valid and valuable, and we will be sure to link to our clinical trial site webpage in the show notes so our listeners can find those. We'll be sharing more interviews with participants of other trials in the future, so be on the lookout for those. And if you are involved in a clinical trial or your loved one is and are interested in sharing your story, please email africky@pwsausa.org, and that will be in the show notes. And so now I'd like to introduce my guests. I'm here with Jennifer Andrews, Christy Rickenbach, and Justice Rickenbach. And like I say, we are all participants involved in the pitolisant trial. That's the experience that we're coming from today, but we're going to maybe not focus so much on the details of that specific trial, but just the experience of the clinical trial. So Jen, do you want to go first and just tell us a little bit about you and your connection to the PWS community?
Sure, I'd love to. Thanks so much for having me on. My first time doing a podcast. I'm very excited. Let's see. My connection to the PWS community has to start with Josephine. I became a mom 8 years ago to JoJo, and 2 days after her birth, we were transferred to the NICU. And 10 days after that, we received the diagnosis of Prader-Willi syndrome. It was actually officially, the diagnosis was on Christmas Day, but they waited a day to tell us. Aww. So December 26th, we spent Christmas in the NICU. Since then, I have learned a lot about myself and JoJo. I have become a parent mentor with PWSA USA and Christy, and do what I can to help the community as well as my kiddo.
Well, thank you for that. And Christy, would you like to introduce yourself? We all know that you are, well, maybe the audience doesn't know, but yeah, just
She's Christy.
She's Christy. If you don't know Christy, you're not paying attention.
I'm actually Justice's mom. That would probably be better. Yeah, so I'm Christy Rickenbach, and I am the mother of 5 children. My youngest, Justice, happens to have PWS. She is taught me more about myself and about life than I can ever even try to begin to explain. Jen, you had mentioned something about getting a diagnosis on Christmas Day. Justice was sent home from the hospital, from the NICU on Christmas Day. Unfortunately, we did not have a diagnosis. They sent us home because they thought that she had SMA and thought that we should be home with all of our children to have one Christmas together. So that was our kind of start. And then from that, I just kind of jumped in after we finally got a diagnosis a month later. Actually, that D-Day is coming up here on the 22nd of January. Not that I remember, but
nobody remembers their diagnosis day.
Nobody remembers that. But yeah, after that, you know, we just decided that we were just going to dive right in and do everything we could to learn and to help other families as much as we possibly could. So that has kind of been my mission for as long as I can remember, was to just give back, because people at PWSA gave to me. They poured into me when I needed it the most.
I just want to say that Christy is underselling herself a little bit, or underrepresenting herself a little bit. Like, what she does for PWS families, including mine, is awesome in the truest sense of the word. Like, she and Justice, I call them my guardian angels. They were the first people that I spoke with on the phone after JoJo was diagnosed. And it was the first time that I felt like, okay, everything is actually going to be okay. And I'm very lucky that I live in the same state as them and I get to see them on a regular basis, semi-regular anyway. But I know just a little bit because she is very private and confidential. But I know how much time she spends with families, and the way she gives back is really special. She has a very special gift. I'm really grateful that Christy and Justice are part of our community.
All right. So thank you. You just made me cheer up a little bit. It's like,
good. I want to. You
not-
deserve some of what you give
No.
back.
I don't. I don't. I do it out of pure love for our community, honestly. For everybody. And because again, people poured into me. So the most important thing I guess I can do is give back. So that's what we do. And I've tried to teach Justice that, and I think she has learned to to give back because so many people poured into her. So
Yeah.
all right. Hold on, please. All right.
Thank you for that, Jen. I appreciate that. Christy definitely needs to be celebrated more than Charity is.
I don't care if you include that in the podcast or not. She just needs to hear it sometime.
Oh, it's going in. It's going in. Justice, I would love to give you a chance to introduce yourself as well. Tell us how old you are and anything you want to tell us about yourself.
Hi, my name is Justice Rickenbach. I am 21 years old, living with PWS and narcolepsy with cataplexy, scoliosis, a lot of other things. See, my list could go on. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be on the podcast. It's an honor or a pleasure, either one. I love to share my story and able to help the community anywhere I can.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So, well, and I want to, maybe this is an aside. I don't know. Freya is in the middle of writing. She has to write a creative autobiography, and she had to kind of choose an overall theme, and she chose PWS. And so she's talking about like basketball and all the things that are important to her, but she kind of weaving in and out how PWS affects that. And one of the kind of prompts was like, people that have influenced you. And Justice, I will say that she chose to write about you. So you have a little blurb in her autobiography about just, seeing what you're doing, because I show her on Instagram and I tell her stories that I hear from Christy or like what I see on your Instagram. And so Freya said, I wish I'd written it down, but she's still working on it. But she said that you help her realize that she can be strong and do a lot of things in her life. So yeah.
I would love to hear that sometime. Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you. So sweet. Tell her I say hi.
Let's start with Chrissy. You guys have been a part of this trial the longest. How did you hear about the trial?
So this is a little out there because we don't necessarily have like a story like everybody else, like, oh, there's a trial, so we're going to join it, right? Because Justice was on pitolisant before it was here in the US. So fortunately for me, I have some very good friends that happen to have children with PWS that found this medication over in Europe. And so we had it personally imported in through the FDA for quite some time before it came here. But once it came to the US, we were no longer able to personally import it in. We couldn't get it. And so the pharmaceutical company that, started producing this gave us this opportunity to be in a clinical trial. Just these group of kids that were getting it personally imported in because they'd been on it for longer. So they already had sort of like some more information that they could go off of instead of starting at square one, right? So they can see more long-term effects from the medication because our kids have been on it for so long. So yeah, I didn't actually hear about it. They heard about us.
Oh, wow. I don't think I knew that.
Yeah. So yeah, again, I mean, there was literally a mom and a dad found this medication and, they were like, we're going to try this. And I remember going over to their house and they are compounding this medication. They were like at their table. I'm like, I'm not even sure what this is, but and it took me a little bit to get on board with it because, I was a little nervous, but best thing that we've ever done.
Yeah. I can understand being nervous. that way. Wow. Okay. So does that look different for you then? Like, so you kind of skipped the placebo or the double blind part.
Right. We were just automatically just put on it. Right. So everything that the people that are doing now that they're, that they know that they're on the medication, we just started with doing all of that. Right.
So you started with like the open label extension,
correct.
basically.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you're on it. And you're still tracked.
Right. And yes, and Justice has to go. I mean, we have to go to the site twice a year, and then we have to do phone calls twice a year. So yeah, it's just like everybody else. It's just that we skipped that first part. And realistically, I mean, the way it worked out, I think for the drug company also was it gave them kind of like a leap forward, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like they're like, we can already see into the future, like what these kids, what's happening when they're taking it, for a longer period of time. So I think the information they're actually collecting from our kids is extraordinarily helpful to those that are just starting it. Because first of all, like we know that, like for JoJo, who's just recently started taking it, that we know that in 3 years it hasn't had any ill effects. You know what I'm saying? For the most part, there's always outliers, whatever. But yeah, so I think it's showing the safety of it for sure.
Yeah. So Justice, do you remember how old you were when you started?
So since 17.
Are you saying since 2017 or since she was 17?
No, since 2017.
Oh, okay.
Well, what was the inspiration for taking this? What kind of?
Oh boy. Well, for as long as I can remember when I was little, I was constantly exhausted to the point where I couldn't even stay awake for any event. I was sleeping. You couldn't wake me up no matter what you did. I was 99% sleeping. Sleeping my whole life, practically the whole day. But I really just wanted a medicine that would help me with narcolepsy, not just for me, but the whole PWS community. If you want, I can tell you how I felt when I first started on it.
Yes, I would love to hear about that, please.
When I first started taking the medication, I felt like I was part of the world instead of just being in the world.
That's beautifully said. I love that.
Yeah, I think we noticed like the biggest difference, like we would be in a group of people, and everybody would be talking and sorry, Justice, but she'd be like, they'd be talking about, oh, we're going to, the Vikings football game. And she'd be like, I have a puppy. I'd be like, wow, that's great, but not really, in the context of our conversation. Shortly after she started taking it, we would be in the same group of people and they would be like, oh, we're going to the Vikings game. She's like, oh yeah, I don't really like football. You know what I mean? But like the connections
on topic.
Yeah. So like it was more like all of a sudden she was able to pay attention to what everybody else was doing and not just what was happening within her own brain. That makes sense.
I remember too. I remember too going to school one day and I go, Mom, was that house always blue? Because I thought it was white.
In context, I drove her to school every single day, the same way. And then one day she was like, after she'd been alcoholistic for a little bit, she was just like, where, I've never seen that house before. I'm like, it's always been there. But she just started noticing things, and that was just, this house was just one thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There was just other things where she would just all of a sudden start noticing them, start picking up on things that she'd never ever noticed before.
I was finally able to have a conversation with my own peers without having to worry about falling asleep or being too tired to have a conversation with them, or staying up to watch my siblings play the sports, or able to do something that I want to do with my friends versus just having to go to bed.
I love that. And it's funny you say that because I mean, Freya does that so much, just kind of we'll be talking about something and it's like, oh, look, a squirrel, like that thing. Yeah, what conversation are you in right now? Because it's not this one. So that's exciting.
Yeah. I think that was like, honestly, I mean, Justice still has cataplectic episodes. She still, needs more sleep than the average person her age, but it's much better, and as one of her doctors once told me, is like, there's nothing that's going to take this away completely, but they can help manage the symptoms so they're not quite as severe, because it was really bad for quite some, right? So,
Yeah.
but even if she still had the sleepiness, just to be able to have that clarity and to be able to pay more attention to her surroundings and things, I would do it just for that.
Mm-hmm.
What
Well,
a
I think that's
huge shift in like quality of life, right? It's just, I remember when I first heard Justice explain it as like feeling like she wasn't just in the world, but part of it. And what a huge, that was so powerful for me. That resonated so deeply. And I thought, gosh, I want that for JoJo. And like, I just think what a shift in that quality of life for Justice or for anybody that has these issues. Being able to participate in conversations is so huge socially for your ability to connect with people. It's so powerful.
Yeah. I mean, I like that clarification that, it's not like a magic fix that's going to make it go away, but it does affect the quality of life and their ability to show up in it. What I've started noticing with Freya, why I agreed to do this or decided to do this, was realizing that she was missing out on so much, just by the pure and simple fact of just napping for 2 hours a day. And then once we got more into it, I started learning more about the focus and the ability to kind of be present. So Jen, you started Josephine, I believe this past summer, right?
Yeah, we started the clinical trial in June. I think like the weekend after school ended for her.
Okay.
I
And
think
what
school
was
was out
like
on a Wednesday and we went on a Friday. Yeah.
and what was like the impetus? Was it kind of like hearing Justice's perspective? Like, did that inspire you, or was it kind of JoJo's behavior?
Yeah.
Josephine?
It was kind of two pronged. It was two pronged. Why we joined the clinical trial, or thought about joining the clinical trial, was A, because of the experiences I've heard from other families that have had a chance to be on it, the good results from the previous, the early clinical trials. And then Josephine started having more significant issues. The year before we did the clinical trial, she had these mysterious episodes of non-responsiveness at school where we still don't know what happened. We've done a lot of testing. Everything was inconclusive, ruled out seizures, but she was unresponsive for 15 minutes, 3 times at school,
Wow.
sitting up sometimes. And yeah, we never really knew what that was. And she also was having more cataplectic episodes. There were some when she was a baby that I just kind of thought like, oh, she just woke up. She's just like momentarily falling asleep again. Or she'd do the thing where her eyes were kind of rolling when she was eating. And I just thought, oh, maybe she'll grow out of that. It'll pass or something. It's not really hurting her right now. So we'll just ride it out. We'll keep an eye on it. Um, but she was starting to have episodes of like full body drops to the floor when she was giddy and laughing. And that gets more concerning because she felt out of control. She would immediately come out of this drop and say, that wasn't me. Or, um, I would be concerned that she was going to hit her head or fall on the stairs. So we looked into that and decided that there was definitely some cataplexy present. She didn't qualify for narcolepsy because she didn't fall asleep fast enough in her daytime sleep study. But she did get a diagnosis of excessive daytime sleepiness, which was, very apparent. Like we had a nap written into her IEP and she always slept when she was offered that nap. When we put it in, she came home after the first day she had the nap at school and said, Mom, whose idea was it to put a nap in my IEP? that was so smart. Thank you so much. That's so good for me. So she really needed it, and it just showed how much she was struggling to even stay awake, let alone learn. And she's one that will never admit that she's tired still. Like, even at 8 years old, she's not tired, no matter what, even if her eyes are drooping. But it really, the more I watched it, the more I really saw how it affected her life. She would run out of steam by the time we got to a place. She would fall asleep in the car almost instantaneously. She was still napping if she had the opportunity, all that stuff, and just tired, the droopy eyes, the like lack of ability to kind of follow the train of thought, like we were talking about, not wanting to do so much. Like if there was a craft available someplace, she didn't really want to do that or participate in it. She went to a art-based nature preschool where they did a lot of art, and there were tons of times that she just didn't want to do the craft. She's like, I just, no, I don't want to do it. And I think part of it was because it just was going to take too much effort, and she just was too tired. So yeah, we saw a lot of that difficulty with participating in tasks, probably due to fatigue. It's hard to tell. And then we just thought we'd give it a go since there was a good safety profile. I've done a clinical trial before, and I think that it's important, especially with small communities like ours, to participate and like get more information about what is and isn't working for our kids, so we can find those things that do work. And the only way we do that is by trying. So when something has a good safety profile, I'm pretty on board.
Yeah, that kind of jumps to one of my later questions that we can get back to. But I just do want to clarify for people that, because you guys, Justice and JoJo, both have actual diagnosis of, like, they did daytime sleep studies and things like that. So Freya does not have any of those, but she has enough anecdotal evidence.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the way to say it, but she fit the profile of who should be in the trial. So I just want to put that out there, that parents, just, in case they're thinking like they have to go through all of this to get these official diagnoses or whatever, that's not necessarily true.
No, I guess, yeah, that's true. There's always a screening process, right, where they determine if you are not qualified. And I had a friend that went through the screening process, which involved traveling out to a site, and then they were told no, they did not qualify, which is just as important, right? You don't want people in a trial who the medication isn't intended for.
Right.
So yeah, you can either, that we did have existing diagnoses, and Freya did not, but it doesn't matter with that screening tool. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was funny because I had some anxiety, like when we were there the first time. I was like, oh my God, does she fit this? Like, I think she does, maybe she doesn't. And then I was literally like, right before the doctor came in, we were actually laughing because she was trying to say Sudoku and she wasn't saying it right. And I was trying to teach her how to say it. And then it was just, we were laughing, and she was, laughing and then collapsing and laughing and collapsing. And I was like, oh, and I knew there was a camera in there, and I would be like, did you see it? Like, it's happening. Okay, we need to be here. Well, I wanted to know if there were any reservations, but Christy, maybe it's a little different for you because, well, you said you maybe had some in the beginning, but that's a totally different scenario because this wasn't a phase 3. I mean, Jen and I both joined as a phase 3 trial, so we knew. But yeah, if either of you, did you have any kind of reservations before you started? And if you did, like, how did you kind of work through that?
Well, I mean, in all honesty, right? I mean, no, we did not start in a clinical trial, like the normal sort of way of going about it, but we did have to try a medication that had not been tried before. You know what I mean? So I'm kind of in the same boat as everybody else. I just had, didn't have anyhow. Yeah, it was just a little bit different. So of course, one, it's scary, right? It's always a little nerve-wracking to try a medication that you're not 100% sure, like, what the side effects for your child would be, or if this medication, if something happens and it's working great for your child, but then they take it away because something happens, or, you know what I mean, or it doesn't get approved. So those fears, I mean, they were there when I started this, and they're still here today. Like, what if? I mean, fortunately for me, I will be able to get it for Justice because it's now approved in the United States for people with, cataplexy. So it'd still be fighting with the insurance companies to get it. Where with right now, I don't have to. So yeah, I think those are probably the biggest fears. I think for anybody is starting a medication not knowing what, side effects there could be. So to do your research and see what the side effects are. And, I don't know. I personally think that clinical trials are so important for, like Jen said, for our community, for any community, especially in the rare disease space, just because without them, we will never be able to advance anything. They're not ever just going to be like, well, it seems like a great idea, so we'll do it, right? There has to be those people that are willing. And that's how growth hormone got approved. I mean, can you imagine being parents who first are like, all right, let's inject our kids every day and see what happens? I mean, that had to be terrifying. And at the same time, I am so grateful for those parents that, sort of took a chance on something that ended up being, the best thing that's ever happened for our kids.
Yeah, I think something that I'll say that I had very little reservations only because I knew it was already approved for other indications, one of which Josephine had. So I thought maybe we'd get a twofer and like solve the cataplexy and the excessive daytime sleepiness issue. But mostly because I knew it was a phase 3 clinical trial. So safety had been proven and side effects were something I was comfortable with. And I think that that's super important is to look at the side effects and make sure that it's something that you are comfortable with for your child. I think one of the things that came out of that ELPFDD with the FDA last summer in June at the conference, a lot of people spoke up about the heightened tolerance for risk in the community, that maybe a drug doesn't have to be the absolute safest. This is going to sound kind of controversial, but some people might be okay with there being certain risks with a drug if there's a very good chance it's going to solve hyperphagia or it's going to solve a extreme behavior issue or something like that, right?
I think that's
not to say that everybody has that tolerance, but you need to be informed, right? And so it's very important that parents look at those side effects and see what they want to do for their child.
Yeah, and I think there's that ratio, like the risk benefit ratio or something like that. I don't think I'm saying it right, but I think about like this talk about DCCR, and that's I hope it passes. I hope it's an option. It's not something that I'm going to look into at this point because it's not that big of an issue for us. But if Freya was, if there were certain behaviors of, getting into the trash can or always sneaking food, getting out of the house to find food, whatever, there are those factors that would make it worth it. Yeah, that's definitely something to take into account.
I just know if I were not able to do certain things, or, if my life was extraordinarily limited because of any, even with Justin, she slept. She slept through a safari in South Africa. The things bounced all over the place. She slept through the whole thing. You know what I mean? So if there were a medicine, which now there is, but if, for anything that might be affecting you, I probably would be like, I'm going to give it a try. I mean, I would, just because you have to be able to live, right? So if you can find something that can help, even if it doesn't make it go away completely, but if it makes it so your life is just a little bit easier, I would be all in to go into a clinical trial.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just because a side effect is listed does not mean that everybody gets that side effect either, right?
And
That's
also, just because
the other thing to take into account.
And just because a medication works for one does not mean it will work for another, which I think, some people are like, oh, I got into the clinical trial and I saw no difference. And that breaks my heart when that happens. But now we know, okay, so maybe it's I don't know.
What are the other factors?
What subtype are you? What, do you know what I mean? There's all these questions that this is now answering, right? Because of some of the questionnaires and stuff that we're forced to answer.
Let's talk about those, because that was something I wanted to talk about, was kind of some of the challenges of this. And honestly, my biggest challenge has been those questionnaires. They stress me out. I'm so worried, like I'm not going to answer right, or I'm going to not remember right. So what I did before this last appointment, I kept I had a little journal on my phone, and I just made a note every day because I wanted to make sure I was answering it accurately. So did you guys have any
smart.
I
should have done
tips or anything?
They're terrible. I mean, they're because I sit there every time, and we've been doing this for I don't even know how many years anymore. Honestly, I mean, it was before COVID that we started going, but every time I look at them and I'm like, huh, did that happen? Did you know what I mean? Like, I can't remember. Or like, they just ask questions and I don't even necessarily know how to answer them because I don't know. You would think that by now I'd be like, yes, no, sometimes five, whatever it needs. But no, every time.
It's tough. Like it takes me so long to answer them. Like the nurse is always coming back and going, "Are you done yet? Oh, not done yet?" I'm trying to be so accurate, and it is so hard to remember. And on the flip side, like I can't data track my whole life. Like
Mhm.
I can't make a tally mark. I'm just not, maybe some people can. I am not that kind of person. I can't make a tally mark every time she has an outburst or is like looking sleepy. I can do it for one of those things. I can't do it for all of the things.
Mhm.
And so I just try to go with my perception because that's what it is in the end, right? It's, am I perceiving a difference in her life? So I just try to give it my best shot and remind myself that that's all I can do because it is like so, it feels like such a big demand. It's like a real challenging brain puzzle. It's like a memory test for me versus like a
Mhm.
tracking of her. And I think it was worse for me at they had like an interview at the end of the placebo arm or placebo part of the trial.
Mhm.
Um, and I was, man, I you also find yourself wanting to say the right thing, right? Like wanting to make the drug look good because we do want drugs,
Right.
right? We
Right.
want options. And so like I wanted the drug to work, but also I don't know if I'm in the placebo arm or not. So I don't know what the right answer is. The quote unquote, I'm going to use bunny ears, right answer. So I had that little battle going on in my mind, even though I find myself to be a pretty like neutral person. I try to be very like fair and balanced and all that, but there's that pull to like root for this medication for us. But sometimes rooting for it is all the time actually. Rooting for it is just being honest with our responses. If
Right.
someone was on the placebo arm and they're like, "Oh yeah, I saw these huge changes," but they didn't because they weren't on the medication, that's good. Like that's what we want. So it's really important for the honesty piece, as harrowing as it feels, to like make sure you're giving the right answer.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will say it helped for me because a lot of I think most of those questions are like, in the past 7 days, have you seen this? So just a week before we went, I just had in my
Yeah.
phone, and so every day I was like, napped, cried, napped, meltdown, napped, and so with with that, I'd like to get into maybe talking a little bit about expectations
Mm.
because I went into this because I had heard this is life changing. This has really positively affected our life. And Jen, you and I had a text a little bit about kind of expectations and how do we manage those expectations? What do those look like? And I'm not really sure what the question is, but just, how do you kind of manage those expectations as you go into this and not kind of let it steer your disappointment or your excitement? Any advice?
It's been a
For me.
journey. This summer was a journey through that part of it, definitely. Like I went in feeling very proud that JoJo was participating and that she wanted to, and very optimistic and really almost desperate to be in the non-placebo arm of the trial. Like I really wanted to be on medication right away.
Same.
Um, and I was very aware of that. I tried to be aware of that. I tried to check in with myself. And I think that's my one strategy that I can offer is just like self awareness. Like try to be aware of how you are feeling and why you might be feeling that way and how that relates to what's really going on in the trial
Mhm.
and what the real goal of a trial is, right? Because they're all a little bit different. My feeling comes from being a mom of a kid with PWS that's struggling with daytime sleepiness to such an extent that it prevents her from participating in 8-year-old life and family life sometimes. So I really wanted her in that part of the trial. And I was so hyper vigilant when we first came home with the medication about like, what's she doing? Is she sleeping? How much is she sleeping? Wow, she's awake. Why is she awake at 9 at night? This has never happened before. Are we on the medication? And it was like almost exhausting. And I have to kind of like tone it down a little bit and be like, all right, chill. We don't know what we're on. And then I started doubting. Then I was like, I don't know. Like summer just started. She just finished first grade. And we literally started the trial the week after she finished school. So summer just started. She's got a whole different schedule. And I don't know what the factor is. Like, is that playing into how much more energy she has right now? She grew a whole bunch this spring. Like, was that factoring into what was going on over the summer? Was it that big of a change? So at first I thought, oh yeah, we're definitely on it. And then I thought, I don't know, maybe we are, maybe we aren't. I can't tell. And then I was like, I don't know. What's the right answer? Like, I want to be able to tell if we definitely are on it or we definitely not on it. And life is just more complicated than that, right? And so that really factored in, is that like there are so many variables in our day-to-day life and her day-to-day life to take into account that it becomes kind of difficult to see clear-cut changes. However, in conversation with my husband, and as the summer kind of wound down, and we also stopped the open labor, or we stopped the like busiest part of the trial, which is that double-blind placebo arm possible part of the trial, right as school started. So we were on the open label extension, where you definitely know you're on the medication right as school started. Like literally Labor Day weekend was when we were down there, and Minnesota is old fashioned and still starts the day after Labor Day. So she went back into second grade, and I was like, she had all this energy, and I was like, is this second grade excitement? Is it being a year older? Is this a drug? And then at that point, that was the best marker for me, was kind of like this fall, because I could compare that to last fall when we weren't on anything. And I thought about how reactive she was last fall. We were in like we were not deep, but I would say for 6, 7 years old, a lot of turmoil, just so upset about so many things all the time, and so sleepy, and taking naps after school and falling asleep in the car. And none of that was happening. And probably two of the biggest changes were how her teachers were noticing how hard she was working in class and how much she was doing. Her reading took off. She had that like click for reading, and she was no longer taking naps in the nurse's office. So that nap that was in her IEP, she still went down every day and laid down, but she did not sleep once. That was pretty telling to me. And that's where I could see when more variables were the same. Like, okay, her school routine is pretty similar to first grade, but then we could see all these changes were actually there. So that was cool for us.
Nice.
Expectation wise, I just think like that self-awareness piece really helps a lot.
Christy, has Justice been off it at all for any reason during this time?
Yes, I had to take her off due to another medical issue, nothing to do with this. So, yes, for a very short time, it was miserable. So, yeah, I could not wait to put her back on. It was for a very short time.
But you noticed a big difference.
If she does not take it, if for some reason, she's like, if she forgets to take her medication, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a very hard day for her. So we make sure that she's really good about remembering to take her medicine, but yeah, we make sure that she takes it. And if she gets to work and she's forgot it, I am more than happy to drive it back up. Yeah, she will not make it through. Well, she will not make it through the day.
Wow. Justice, are you in any other clinical trials? Or you can't be, can you?
I don't know.
No, she
No.
is.
Okay.
She is not. She is not. Most of the time, you can only be in one
Okay.
at a time. And she's never been in any other clinical trial that involved medications, so like this family, I
Okay.
don't remember what it was called now, but when she was really little, they did like, oh my goodness, I cannot remember. It was down at Dr. Miller's office, but anyhow, it was to determine like between siblings, like what the differences were between PWS, and it's, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I can't remember the name of it. But anyhow, it was this family study. And so, she was in that, and then she's been in like this genome project that
Mhm.
and that, but nothing with medications.
Okay. Well, I asked Freya this question. I asked Freya if she could choose a clinical study to be in, if it was limitless, like if there was something that a clinical trial that she would want to be a part of, what would it be? So, Justice, I'm just wondering if you have an answer for that. I don't know how clear that question is, but if you could just create a clinical trial for yourself or people with PWS.
I would just say to get rid of like anxiety or like the anxiety piece or like anything for like honestly the anxiety piece or like any other piece that would help like anybody else. Like the medication could just help wherever like they the most struggling with, it would fix it. Or like make it
Ooh.
Yeah, magic pill. You just take it, bam, whatever.
Love it. Like a panacea, isn't that what those are called? Or
Okay.
in herbals, there's herbs
I
called
like this one for
adaptogens.
definitely
yeah.
the anxiety piece. If
I
I
like
have
Justice's idea because it's like bespoke medicine, like a medicine that figures out what you need and fixes it. How cool would that be?
That would be amazing.
I would join that.
Me too.
Yeah,
I'd be in
I'll
that
be in
one.
that trial.
My curiosity, can you fix a lot of things?
Right.
or just the anxiety piece.
The anxiety. Yeah. I interviewed, I hate that I'm forgetting his name, but when I interviewed him, it was during COVID. He was 17 with PWS, and we were talking not about clinical trials. Griffin. Yes. Thank you. And that was the thing that he talked about, was that there's so much focus on their hyperphagia, but actually the focus needs to be on the anxiety, because the anxiety is what drives so much. And that was a real eye opener for me.
Griffin and Justice have talked about that in length,
I mean, it's not like all about the food for me always. It's just different things like my routine, or am I going to be safe, or when is it going to happen? I need to bring anything. Like I always feel like because of my anxiety and because of it, I have to like, what is the word? Plan.
She does have, but then part of me wonders how much of that I put on her.
I was going to say, is her neurotic mom?
Well, yeah. No, but for real. I mean, because from the time they're born, we're like, we have to plan. We have to plan your food. We have to plan what's going to be there to eat. We have to plan where you're going to take a nap. Do you know what I mean? Where maybe if I would have just been like, we're going to go and whatever happens, happens. We'll see what happens. You know what I mean? I don't know. So did I cause her anxiety? I mean, in all fairness, it comes to her pretty honestly without PWS. So.
Well, same with my family. And like my husband says, if you're paying attention, you're going to have anxiety. Like there's like, pay attention to the world around you.
Right.
There's some anxiety inducing.
Right.
Things.
Right.
So I don't want to take up too much time, but I do want to, I'd like you both kind of touched on it, and maybe we can weave this into any advice or words of wisdom for families that want to get involved, and then also kind of reiterate the importance of doing these trials for the community and PWS research.
Christy, take it away.
Would love to. I would love to. Well, first, I mean, again, I think doing your research, right? And there are a bunch of different clinical trials happening, or ones that may start. And so it's really important to do your research, figure out which one you think one is going to possibly benefit your child the most, or which one is easiest for you to get to, right? I mean, there can be a lot of trouble. check and make sure it fits into your schedule. And then don't be afraid to ask questions. When you're there, ask so many questions. Ask why they're doing what they're doing. What is this, supposed to prove? And then don't try to, as we all do, try to overanalyze everything that's happening, right? Try to live your life, because I promise you, you're going to go in and you're going to answer the questions and you're going to be like, am I answering this right? But what they want is they want your honest answers. And so as long as you answer them honestly, they're going to get the best results. And with those results, it's going to help our children. But if we're not giving honest answers, it's not doing anybody any favors, and it's going to skew the data terribly. So, but that, and then get involved in any way you can to help further research. Again, going back to those parents that started growth hormone. I mean, hats off to them. I don't know that I don't know that I could have done that. I mean, that was, so there was a lot of brave people that went before me that have made my journey a whole lot easier, and a whole lot easier for me to become involved and want to help others, because there were a lot braver people before me that stepped in, and stepped in that gap. So forever grateful for them. Yeah, that's kind of my elevator pitch.
That was beautiful. Jen, anything to add?
Wow. That was so good. I'm trying to think of what I can add. I think it's just a really exciting time for PWS and treatment. There are so many drugs in development right now and in late stage clinical trials that we can help with. And because we're a small community, we have to have participants, because if we don't get enough participation, it doesn't work, right? Like, they can't validate the data. If they can't test, then we don't get the medicine. So we don't have the luxury of being the huge group of Americans that have certain kind of heart issue and thousands of people want to participate in a clinical trial. We have a very small community. And so this is one of those places where we really need to come together and help each other out. I would say, like, it's great. I mean, it's fantastic that travel expenses are covered when you do a clinical trial. And I think that should and could allow for more different kinds of people to participate in clinical trials, which is so important, because we don't know if DCCR or growth hormone or pitolisant or whatever is going to affect someone of a certain Asian background differently than it's going to affect someone who's white or anything like that. Like, there's so many factors. It's really important to get a wide variety of people into these clinical trials. And so I think it's great that they've removed economics as a barrier. That said, do not discount the disruption to your life that, like, frequent travel for a clinical trial can be. And for some of our PWS kiddos, that kind of like change in routine is really tough. So do think about that too. And if you take it on, know that there are so many people who are so grateful for your participation and for you helping to kind of like move this mountain or chop away at it and make it a little bit easier to climb. It's really necessary. And we have such great opportunities right now. I hope more of us get involved.
I love that image of chipping away at the mountain. It's a nice metaphor. Justice, do you have any words of wisdom for people who might be wanting to get involved in a trial?
Please help me and my friends and look into being a part of a clinical trial.
Love it.
Perfect,
Thank you so
Justice.
much. I am so grateful to all three of you for coming on and talking about your experience and being open and honest and sharing with everybody, because this also helps. Hopefully there will be some families that listen to this and think, oh, well, that doesn't sound too bad, or if they can do it, I can do it too. So just want to encourage everybody to check out that clinical trial webpage and see if there's a fit for you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of PWS United. If you want to learn more about Prader-Willi syndrome and how PWSA USA is making strides in advocacy, family support, and research, visit www.pwsausa.org. And while you're there, we encourage you to sign up for our Pulse email newsletter to stay informed about the latest news, resources, and events. Don't forget to subscribe to the PWS United podcast so you never miss an episode. Our team is always available to support families and their loved ones living with PWS 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You can call us at 941-312-0400 or email info@pwsausa.org. Catch a new episode next Tuesday, and until then, have a great week.